Coming up in the latest episode of Netball Unlocked, we've got a Manchester Thunder legend alongside us to review round 4 and look ahead to round 5. We'll hear from Camilla Buchanan and Suzie Liverseidge of Mavericks winner Thriller. Plus there's insight into our latest extended interview as Lauren Palmer takes us to Leeds via Manchester. Hello and welcome along. We're into double figures, Chloe, as far as episodes are concerned. And to mark the occasion, we've decided to bring in a debutant. And I'm delighted to say that Kerry Almond is alongside us. Kerry, I don't want to embarrass you here, but that might be the first time you've been a debutant in a while, perhaps.
For a long time. Well, actually, no. Since last summer, technically, I was a debutant. So.
Okay. Cool. First of all, how are you? What are you up to? Are you enjoying this year's Super League?
I'm very well, thank you. Currently just, getting on with the normal everyday working life, and kind of doing a bit of coaching with the Thunder men's and mix, which I've been doing for the last few years. So we're just preparing to start our leagues upcoming in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, I am enjoying the start of Super League. It's been an interesting couple of rounds, and also enjoyed the start of Essendon at the weekend as well. So a lot of netball last weekend was watched.
Kerry, can we just definitely confirm that you're retired from Super League netball and I think Prem netball as well, because you have a habit of coming in and out of retirement?
I've only done that once. Not quite reached levels of a certain Mavericks person, mentioning no names. Retired from Super League and just recently retired from National Prem netball as well with Oldham. Not retired from netball, but yeah, just Super League and Prem.
Slowly stepping back.
Yeah, we're getting there and we're kind of moving more into the background, which is definitely where I need to be now.
Just quickly on Prem, Kerry, we spoke to Claire Jones a few weeks ago. She was playing for Hucklecote at the time. To most people, like, people might not realise that the standard of Prem netball is really, really, really strong, isn't it? Like my daughter plays for Turnford, so I've been along to see them a few times. It's an incredible standard. So how much are you going to miss playing at that kind of level as well?
It's an incredible standard of netball. I've played Prem for 20 years or so, I think. Before it was even National Prem, so before it was You played home and away. My first season, we played literally everyone once, and that was it. So you were lucky as to whether you got 4 home games or 3 home games. But the standard of netball is incredible over the years. We've obviously had loads of Super League players playing. We even had some internationals one year before that got obviously banned from England netball in the Home Office with visa rules and regs. Lots of England internationals have played over the years. So it's a phenomenal quality of netball. There's 30 incredible teams, and then below that you've got your regional leagues as well, who the winners of those play off with the bottom of Prem 3 to get into that. So there's quite a pathway going on. Some incredible young players that are coming through. We've had 16, 17-year-olds playing for us this season at Oldham. Obviously, one of those being Shannon Malik, who's done such a good job for Thunder over the last 2 rounds. I am going to miss it. I'm not going to miss all the travelling. Because we had some games that were like 10:30 on a Sunday morning, and it's a 4-hour drive, so we'd actually stay overnight. So I'm not going to miss that side of things, but I'll miss the girls and the actual being on court for sure.
Kerry, you have this great kind of netball playing career, but we recently heard you on a microphone for Sky Sports. Can you tell us about that comms experience that you had? Did you enjoy it? You were great. From Paul and I were both saying how cool you were on the mic.
I loved it. It was my first proper experience of commentating. So Sky messaged me before Christmas, seeing if I could go down and do like some sort of media training day, but it was too short notice for me to get it off work at the time, and then it just happened that one Sunday morning I was actually arriving at Oldham Leisure Centre for a game, and I got a message off Sky producer who just said, "Are you free on Friday? Can you come and do some commentary?" So I had to wait until Monday to see if I could book half a day off work, and luckily I could, so I just headed over to Leeds and had an amazing couple of hours of fun with Lucy, who was brilliant. Her first game as well, so we were both absolute nervous wrecks at the start of it. We're like, oh my God, we hope this goes well. And there was just that moment, the one particular moment I remember is when Joyce Avila scored that absolutely blind her from the circle edge, and we both just turned round and just like screamed in each other's faces. It was so much fun, and it was nice. I think that it was Leeds that I was commentating on. I think if it had been Thunder, I would have been a bit more kind of like, oh, I need to be very not biased. But it was good that it was Leeds, obviously with Lauren being there as a head coach, and I know her quite well, and Joyce playing, and Harriet Jones as well, who I played with at Oldham as well, and Ella Bowen. And then for it to be against Birmingham, where obviously there's Gabby Marshall, who I've played with for years through, again, Oldham, and Thunder. And yeah, it was just really, really good fun. Hopefully they'll have me back, but who knows? They've been branching out a little bit. Obviously, Yaz Brooks was on this weekend, and Annabelle Roddy. We've had various different people, so it's kind of nice that it's not just the same people. But yeah, hopefully they have me back at some point, but we'll see. It's a long season.
I was going to ask you about that, Kerry, because obviously as far as kind of this whole new era and even netball coverage in general is concerned, like I suppose people don't necessarily grow up wanting to be a netball commentator, unless you're Lucy Goodman, obviously, as she told us a couple of weeks ago. But it is quite interesting. We talk about new era for the players, but this kind of media coverage that we're hoping to sort of see and grow and blossom, to sort of see those players who maybe aren't playing anymore, is kind of a nice avenue and an important avenue for you guys as well.
I think so. I think it's great that they've had people like me and Yaz, who are obviously recently not playing anymore, to do that, because we're kind of a little bit more current. And then having someone like Annabelle, who's still actually playing in the Next Gen League. These are players that have kind of got their fingers on the pulse. They still know what's going on if they're not playing, or they've got insights into things. Like before that game, I could have a chat with Ella Bowen and just say, what's going on? What's your niggle? So I think that is really, really good to have that. We're more in tune with the current rule changes and things like that. And whilst it's great having, obviously, the... I don't want to say the old guard, because Pam and Ebony are actually not that much. I think Pam's older and Ebony's younger than me. So I think it's just nice to have the different voices, and it's not always the same people game after game, because people have different quirks and different personality traits, and they'll see games very differently. So I think it's a great thing. And hopefully they've got a few more former players or next gen players lined up to have a crack at it as well soon.
We get a couple of questions, Kerry, about commentary. How hard do you think is it actually to call a game, and how much of a skill is it? I mean, you said you sort of have had to bounce the media day, so that makes me even more impressed with how you managed it. But perhaps for those that understand it and what's involved in it, like, do you think it is harder than it seems?
I think it's different, because obviously if you have the lead commentator is the one that does most of the talking, so obviously someone like Kath Mary or Caroline Barker, who I don't think we've heard this year, and Lucy, like they're the ones that take on the main role of the talking. I found it difficult to work out whether I was talking too much or if I wasn't talking enough, because it's that, is there too much dead space, is there not enough? Am I interrupting what Lucy was saying? So there was a lot of thoughts like that, but I just kind of went, if I saw something good, I just said it. I've only ever done one game before, and that was a Thunder pre-season friendly in 2021 against Pulse, and it was just a random game that Thunder streamed. So I was a bit like, oh, was it okay? And it's just knowing those excitement levels. And I think for me, I've been quite critical of some of the commentary on X, whatever you want to call it. So I was a bit nervous about that and about how I was going to be perceived by people. But once I started talking about netball, it was like, oh, it's fine, just talking about a game. Like, it's just another game we're talking about, and hopefully people are entertained with those insights, which again is why I think it's key to have recently retired players.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a fascinating part of the journey. Also part of the journey, but before we get into the games, Kerry, how have you found 2.0? As people are calling it so far? You know, there's plenty to get stuck into, whether it's super shot, whether it's squads of 10, arena games, all those sorts of things. What are your overall takeaways from sort of 4 rounds of netball so far?
There's some aspects that I really like. Like, I like not having draws. I think that's really good, because people just want to see a game with an outcome. And from my point of view, when you hit finals netball, you don't play draws. So why would you play draws through the season? It then allows the players to kind of get to grips with what's going to happen if there is a draw in finals netball. I like the bonus point for losing being within 5. because I think that helps to stop the team that's losing kind of going, what's the point? And just chucking on players willy-nilly, even though obviously with squads of 10, you don't really have those players that you're perhaps thinking not really going to put them on like you would with a squad of 12. However, having said that, I'm not a fan of the squads of 10. I think that's been highlighted quite deeply with obviously Thunder's injury issues before the season started, and then Mavericks losing 2 of their circle defenders, and now obviously Liam Middleton going. I think if you've got a squad of 10, losing even one player is huge. If you've got a squad of 12, you can manage a little bit more. Kind of, I'll use myself as an example. Obviously, the last 2 seasons for me weren't great injury-wise, but we had a squad of 12, and we had those training partners that were in training with the team that could then step up, like Elliot McCormick, who did a brilliant job, particularly last season when she stepped up. But now if you lose one player, that's a key part of your squad. And I don't know about a lot of teams, but I would imagine that Next Gen and Super League don't necessarily train together. So how easy is it for those players to step up, particularly if it's a shooter going from not playing Super Shot to playing Super Shot? So I'm not a fan of the squads of 10. I think we went from 180 players or something last season to then having 80. So it's like we've lost half of the players, and I didn't like that. I thought they'd decrease the number of teams or players, but not both. But that's just my opinion on that one. A Super Shot, still not a fan. Don't like it. I don't think it's added anything to it. Yeah, we had 2 really close games this weekend, but I think we still would have had those close games without the Super Shot, personally. But yeah, not a fan. I've not changed my mind on it, and I don't know if I will or not.
Yeah, I think it's interesting though, because to go back to what you were saying about the 10, we'll hear from Suzie Liverseidge later, because I asked her about the loading and what that does when you're a 10, because for us, we're trying to piece together why injuries are happening, and because we are changing so many things at once, it's harder to just be like, well, it's that, isn't it? Because there are so many different things at play. But it's one of the perks, I suppose, of the 10 is that you're closer, and like everyone gets court time and you know your role. And I think some players really enjoy that, but then it actually makes the loss a little bit more devastating when it does happen, because you've become such a key member of the team. I think, Kerry, can you speak a little bit about how, when that happens, when a player goes down, like what do you do as a unit, and what are the next steps, the decisions that have to be made? And I think also the bit that I understand as well is that because it's a 10, and maybe you're coming back to play and you've been told you can play 15 minutes, coaches now in this league are going to go, okay, well, if I'm only going to have you for 15, I can't afford you on my bench. Actually, I need to wait until you're more like 45 before I bring you in, because actually you're not really worth it at that point.
Yeah, I think that last point is a good one. And I think those players can drop into net, because that's what Ella Bowen did in the first game of the season. So she didn't play the NSL game, but she played in the Gen game beforehand as part of her loading and return to play. So I think you can use the Next Gen League for that if someone is coming back, if you want to, or if you're registered as one of the players. I'm not really sure. I don't think the rules have been explained very well at all about that, because I don't know whether Ella maybe was registered for Next Gen, because otherwise would we have seen Nicola Smith for Thunder? I'm not sure. When you're losing one player, obviously I've been through it a few times when firstly Greggy did her ACL in one game a few years back, and obviously Sarah Bayman did hers as well, and I think she missed one of the Commonwealth games. It's awful when one of your teammates and your friends goes down with what you know already is a season-ending injury. It's horrible, because you know there's nothing you can do for them or to help them, or you have to somehow get on with it and kind of get back on with your game if it is in the middle of a game. And I know I spoke to Alex Johnson, who plays for Cardiff Dragons, after their Thunder game at the weekend, and we were obviously talking about how they've picked themselves back up after that week, and it's just such a shift in mindset to go from, is she okay? Because obviously their game was cancelled, so they didn't have to immediately play on. But it's that shift of, is she all right, our teammate, like, what's going on? To that shift then of, right, we've got to get back to training, we've got a game at the weekend. And it is difficult when it is such a bad injury like that. I think we've obviously, through the last few years, Thunder didn't suffer any of those, thankfully. My injuries were more kind of like, mine were like loading injuries and things like that, and one of them was just a freak accident in training. So it wasn't as bad because it wasn't mid-game. But when you're losing a key player from your squad, especially when there is only 10 of you, I think, yes, it's bad in the playing side of things, but I think it's that personality side of things as well, and how it affects the makeup of your squad, because you've done all pre-seasons together and you've done all this team bonding, and then all of a sudden 10% of that is gone and somebody else having to step up who's not been in that environment, and it's how are they going to slot in. And if you're Mavericks and you've just lost 2 of your players that have been there, and then obviously now this week obviously Kira Rothwell as well, for however long that's going to be, it's like, how are those players that are coming into that squad going to integrate in? Like Gemma Donahue literally came in, got off plane and played and fitted in brilliantly. But how does that affect the squad and those other players around it? And that's the tough part that I think coaches have got a heck of a job this season with the sheer number of injuries that we've had already.
It is interesting, and it's something that Chloe and I mentioned last week. I think as much as kind of some of the early ones have been impact, as we've discussed here, load in, and as you go through a season, sort of fatigue sets in and all those types of things. So it's definitely going to be one of the main talking points, I kind of think, as the season evolves. You sort of mentioned there about Mavericks. Since we last recorded, we had a little bit of news. Chloe, you were down on the south coast in the sunshine at the weekend. What is the latest as far as Mavs are concerned? Kerry mentioned Gemma's in. We still think we have Kerrit as a temporary replacement at the moment.
Yep. And that's that. So she's temporary. Amy Hepworth-Wayne, if I get that right, it's not Flanagan, came in for Kira Rothwell temporarily. The situation was put to me quite bluntly by Suzie first.
It's no secret that you guys have been hit massively by injury in the last couple of weeks, and then Kira obviously out for this round. How has it been as a squad, like adapting to those changes?
Yeah, obviously gutting to lose such critical players from our team, and we do really miss them. But the new girls that have stepped in have been absolutely amazing. Like Gemma literally landed this week and played an absolutely incredible game today, and she's so lovely and fitted right in with the squad. So yeah, the team's been super adaptable. The girls that are injured are still really in the environment and like supporting us all the way. So yeah, I think it's been as seamless as it can be, given we had like 3 surgeries in 2 days for a team.
That's incredible. 3 surgeries in 2 days. Yeah. And how have you found that being in a 10, being part of the 10, the loading? Because lots of people are like worried about the injuries that are coming in. What's your experience with it?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. I think the biggest problem is the training times. Like, we have to commit to training during the day, which means then we're lacking like training partners to come in. So we'll often only be able to get the uni girls in, or even I know when we were looking for extra players, it was like who can actually available to train in our training times. But then I have also loved the 10 being really close knit, like everyone's kind of playing and has a role. So I do enjoy that side of it. So I kind of see both sides.
So that was quite dramatic. And I think maybe that Tamsin Greenway picture wider piece was able to sort of pull her in and pull her across. And as Kerry kind of alluded to, Gemma is a definite replacement for Chelsea Blackman, because that's an import for an import. So they are, I think, probably sort of, I think like Thunder as well, with there was, in terms of if everyone's getting a bit lost with temporary replacement players and whatever, like the let me remember. Anya Williams was a temporary replacement, and then had to be temporary replaced by Shannon Malik. So I think the idea is that it is supposed to be quite flexible, and it will mean that we see rotation, but that's the rule kind of working in place. Obviously, I think Kerry, actually you clarified this with Greggy for us all on the internet,
on socials,
how Amy came into the picture exactly, and it is just like,
really would just like to see a bit more transparency on that. That was something simple that Mavericks could have done. Just gone, Amy was registered on our Next Gen squad, and therefore she's eligible as a temporary replacement player. It just stops the questions, and I get that teams kind of want to keep things in-house, but something like that, it's going to build questions. So just nip them in the bud beforehand and be a bit more open, instead of people going, well, how is she eligible for Super League because she's not in the Negan squad? I even checked the website just to make sure I wasn't making that up, and she wasn't there. And then luckily Greggy came up with an idea, and then Satchel Grant from Mavericks actually went, yep, she got registered, and then she could come up. I was like, just say that in the first place, just be more open with that. And that's something that I think lots of fans want. They've been crying out for years to have squads put out on social media before games, and that was brought in last year, and the reaction to that was brilliant. So let's just keep building on that, just being a bit more open and honest about things like that. We all know that Kira's obviously out for whatever reason, but how is Amy eligible? So I think that's something that clubs could be better at.
Yeah, and I think, Paul, sorry, as we say, like every time we sort of come to do the preview element, is that we are only working with the information that we have. So we don't know what the situation is with Kira, as we're sure we'll get to when we get to that part. But yeah, I think they've been through a tremendous amount very, very quickly. So I think that's sort of key. But yeah, it was interesting, and I think Kerry already alluded to it, just the way that both Amy and Gemma not only were just there, but the way they slotted in and how crucial they ended up being to the game outcome as well. I think that was really, really impressive. And those looking at Mavericks and the fact that they've still managed to pull off victories, you know, they're sitting 9 points in the ladder, and how they're adapting. I think this speaks to quite a good culture in that place, that they can just keep taking these knocks and keep delivering on a court, even if to the stress of everybody in the nature of how they do it.
Camilla, second time, a 1-goal game. Tell me how you're feeling about that.
Yeah, we've just said to them, can you not, please, with the 1 point wins? I mean, it's not good for aging process. But, you know, we've just talked about the fact that they've had 3 players having operations this week, you know, 2 new players into the squad. It's unbelievable that they were able to put that out there. Not surprising, because of what we see each week. But a massive task to do for them, and just so incredibly proud of how they stuck at it. You know, that was a 60-minute performance there with 10 players. And yeah, just really proud of them.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about those injuries that you've had, because they're not just small injuries, right? They're season-ending ones.
Absolutely.
What's that been like for you as a coach, managing that situation, managing that environment?
Look, this is a group, like they've got there's a goal in mind, okay, and you know, firstly, our injured players have been incredibly involved still. You know, they're still coming to training sessions, you know, they're in contact every day, so they're still very much part of the group. But it's, you know, this is elite sport, like it's not unheard of for this kind of thing to happen. Everyone's just going about their job and getting it done. So I'm sure there'll be some time for reflection, but it's so fast paced, there hasn't been time to think about it. You know, we're getting players on the plane from Australia, we're calling players back that are about to go on Easter holidays, that haven't played in over a year. So there hasn't been much time to digest it, if I'm really honest. But I mean, they've just shown what their intent is. So
yeah, Gemma and Amy came on court kind of seamlessly in a way. But what was the decision behind that? Because I think Vicky, you haven't actually ruled her out, if I'm right, because of the temporary replacement rules. How have you used those?
Yeah, so the temporary was for Kira this week, because she's obviously out. Vicky is, you know, she did her ACL, so that's going to be, you know, she won't be back for this season. But yeah, just, you know, Amy obviously worked really closely with Tamsin and Mickey, so they knew her really well. And, you know, coming in, you know, the language that we're using, like, she, you know, she's au fait with it. So, and she's an absolute winner. So we knew that she's kept in shape. She's been playing. And, you know, she came into training on Thursday and, you know, baptism of fire, I think, but she got the job done. And Gemma, you know, we'll be keeping an eye on. And yeah, she came in. I'm not sure her jet lag is officially over yet, but she's, you know, a girl that's just about her business. So it's seamless in going in.
I think the transparency piece is something that I was kind of banging the drum from when I was back at Sky. Like, you'd want to try and write a preview for a piece, and you wouldn't be able to get hold of any information. And I kind of brings us on quite nicely to Suncore Netball, which started at the weekend, SSN, and I thought it was great. On Friday morning, there was like a full list of all the teams, all the players who were missing and all the players who were replacing them. That was Friday morning before the game started on Saturday and Sunday. And it was just clear, this is who's playing, this is who's available. So I do think we obviously will learn a lot from SSN and claim to have done so far. But I think on issues of transparency, and that's just my position as a journalist, I'd just love to see that open and honest nature. We don't have press conferences, which is, if you don't have a press conference, then you kind of have to do your own media briefing. I would do that in this day and age. I would say there's no reason that you can't just put sort of 3 or 4 minutes out with the head coach or someone like that on a Friday. But on SSN, Kerry, you mentioned you were watching loads of netball this weekend. What were your early thoughts of what we saw?
Yeah, well, I watched 3 out of the 4 games. The one game I haven't watched yet is the Thunderbirds and Vixens, which is kind of annoying, I suppose, because those are the big 2 that everyone's kind of going for this year. I watched Mavericks and I'm going to get it wrong again. I always get it wrong. Mavericks and Lightning. That's what it was. The other game on Saturday. I thought that was a really good game. Interesting with Amy Parmenter obviously sitting forward into centre and Sasha Glasgow's first game back, and it's just another level of quality and speed. And I'm going to say this, but production. That's one thing that everyone said, obviously, and I know it's on proper telly, so it can do that kind of things. But again, with the former players and the insights, and it's really nice to have again the different people. Really enjoyable games. I think Sunday morning I watched Firebirds and Giants. Yeah. So I watched these games and I can't remember who played them. So that was obviously a good game to watch. Obviously, seeing how Imogen did. I think she's going to have a steep learning curve about how she's going to have to play a little bit more kind of tight on the body, rather than being that floating defender. But I thought she did a good job for her first game. Mary looked a little bit nervous, but kind of grew into the game, and she's just going to get better and better in that league. And then the last game as well with Fever and Swift. Kind of a lot of people were surprised about the score on that one, but I thought it was going to go that way, because obviously Fever have now got to go from, they've spent the last however many years feeding 6'5" Fowler and Imbard, to then having a bit more of a rotational circle, whether it was Wilkinson in there or Conwenda. So it's a completely different style of play for them. And obviously Fran Williams starting at wing defence did a great job, and probably shouldn't have taken her off, Dan. Just saying. I wouldn't have taken her off. She was doing a phenomenal job at wing defence. And when they brought her off, it then just allowed Swift's wing attacks to kind of dominate and start feeding Grace Nowicki like nobody's business.
From everywhere.
She's just phenomenal. I'm glad I've never had to play against her. She's unreal. And the fact that she's so young and she's only going to get better playing with those players around her. It was just nice as well to see Helen looking really happy on court as well. Yeah. Really, really pleased with that.
I've been calling it like Swift's doing like Uno reverse sort of on Fever. That's really what it felt like. Just like literally stepping into the goal third and just absolutely yeeting it in, and it just landing perfectly. Like I think Grace was nervous for about 4 minutes, and then it just like settled into this like masterpiece. And I feel a bit silly, Paul, because in our SSN preview, I obviously kept the Swifts out of my top 4. So Jenny Sinclair sent me a quick message to say, yeah, they are looking really good, aren't they? And I was like, yeah, they are. But I think, yeah, it's okay. I'll take it on the chin. But look,
you did it for the content, right? That's why you did it. Did it for the content.
Yeah,
did it
to
for
be
the
difficult.
hits.
But I think it's it's a long season, so that could still change. Grace has got a lot of goalkeepers to come up against in this league, but I think the production, Kerry, like I have to agree. I don't think we can be shy about it. Like the performance of those in front of the camera, the level of insight, the mics in the 90-second timeout, and hearing exactly what the coach that has called the timeout is saying to their squad. I think that's such a cool piece to have. Someone mentions, like there's another Lightning penalty, and then the penalty graphic pops up, and you see exactly where the balance is. So there's someone paying attention, straight up with that information. I think it just does, take it to the next level. And Jenny Sinclair, who we did have on, did say, she reckons it's about 10-year gap between where NSL is and where SSN is. So I think we maybe have a little bit of waiting to do, don't we, Paul, when it comes to broadcast. Do you want to say anything here on that?
I think it, at the minute it's still not good enough, is it? I think we've kind of, every game that's been streamed in some capacity this weekend or over the last few weekends, there's been some kind of issue with it, whether sort of mics have dipped out, whether scoreboards have gone wrong, whether, it's, in this day and age, we've said this before, but X can be a bit of a cesspit, and it's not a nice place a lot of the time. But I think this is not just, a few people with a few issues. This is something that's been happening for a long, long time. And we should say, we promised last week that we'd try and start doing some digging, and we have. We've reached out to both England Netball and Sky Sports. We haven't got official statements as it stands, but we are working on that conversation. So I think as far as that's concerned, we're maybe hoping to have answers. But I think, and I'd like your take on this, Kerry, as an ex-player. And as we will reference, I think all season, Claire Jones spoke so brilliantly about it to start off. It was like, if we're going to hold the kind of players to account as kind of professional and these top standards now, that kind of needs to be the case off the court as well, whether it's the arena experience, whether it's the quality of broadcast, whatever it might be. And I feel like those really should be non-negotiables for the first step on this sort of however many year ladder it's going to be.
Yeah, I kind of feel a little bit like it's gone backwards a bit. I read a comment earlier on today, actually, that someone had watched a game from a few years ago. I'm not sure whether it was either slightly pre-COVID or whether it was like 2021, 2022. And the production has gone down. And I think that is part of the fact that everything now is on streaming services. There's nothing on actual TV apart from the finals netball, which is such a shame. And I get it's probably a cost thing and getting people there, but we have to keep the fans invested. And if they can't watch the games, then they're not going to attempt to watch the games. So there's been that many issues with the streams and things that some of the fans are just going to go, well, what's the point watching it? SSN's back on now. I can watch that. It's, I think, a ridiculous price compared to Super League. Like, it's a lot cheaper for some of these other countries to watch. So why are they going to pay to watch the Super League when they can't even get a stream where the audio matches the video? I actually turned off the Rhinos and Pulse game on Friday because the sound was out and it kept skipping back a second or two, and it is a shame. I think it's not set the tone for the professional era for me personally. I think it needs to go back to one game as a minimum being on the TV. Whether that means we need to look away from Sky, then we probably need to look away from Sky and go to someone that will actually put the effort in there. A big bugbear for me is there's no stats. It was actually really, really hard in that first game to commentate when there was no stats. Like, there was nothing fed to us. It's difficult to do your job at the time when you've got no stats. Even on the Super League website, you cannot even find out who's leading on the intercept charts. Like, you have to look at each individual player to find out their stats. I want to look and go, right, okay, who's got the most deflections? Who's got the most penalties? Who is winning on rebounds? Like, attacking, like, offensively and defensively? But they don't have that anymore. It's so difficult to find any basic information that you want from these netball games that it's just turning fans off. And this new era of professionalisation so far, for me personally as a viewer, I don't think I've enjoyed it as much. And I don't know what any current players would say on that, but the lack of stats for me is a big thing alongside the stream, because people just want to know how players are playing, like who is the most penalised in this game, because there's a lot of comments about a lot of whistle, and I think Claire was right when saying that if we're going to hold the players to a certain standard, then everything else off court has to be a certain standard, but then also the umpires. So if the players are being paid, for me, the umpires need to start being put on that ladder as well, because how are they being expected to work a full-time job, take time off work to go and umpire a game? Obviously, I spend quite a lot of my time with Caswell Palmer because I coach with him at Gunderman's and Mixed, and he has to take time off work to go and travel to these games. How is that? I get that they're going to have to if they've got a full-time job, but these umpires should be being paid properly, because the players cannot progress to the levels they're needed unless the umpires do as well. But then on that, they also then need to improve the umpire mics are great when they work. as well. So, and they didn't work very well in the Mavericks game. I think, was it Alison Harrison's that was, you couldn't, it was like someone was like just pressing an on-off switch sometimes. You couldn't hear what she was saying. And I think that goes back to the streaming quality as well. I know I kind of went off tangent with the umpires, but it's just not great, to be perfectly honest. But then I think sometimes, is it the signal in venues? Because obviously a lot of the venues are concrete buildings and brickwork, like the Mavericks. I think 2 of the Mavericks games so far have been in kind of like brickwork stadiums. And I don't know if that's got something to do with it, but do they need to invest in having a better Wi-Fi? I don't know if it's a Wi-Fi router or something that boosts the signal, because we can't keep going on like that. We're 4 weeks in and all we've talked about is the quality of the streams.
Yeah,
I agree. And I would say, like, if it was like 1 or 2 bits and bobs, not that that's acceptable, but okay, there are things to work through. But I think the overriding point is that this has happened most seasons, I think it's fair to say. And, like, that shouldn't be the case, really. I think it's pretty simple. Everyone understands that things happen technical wise. We've all turned our computer on and off, haven't we? Like, it's not quite as simple as that all of the time. And it just feels like for a product of this standard, we should just be a bit better. But we can kind of move it on, because the standard of netball at the weekend, I described it as, well, how did we describe it, Chloe? The most dramatic weekend rather than the most entertaining. And if you're not a fan of the Super Shot, Kerry, I think you'll probably go with dramatic rather than entertaining, right?
when I put it to the people of Instagram, I think dramatic came out sort of on top.
Yeah.
As the overriding feeling coming into the game, coming out of the weekend. Pardon. I think the thing is, like, it's easy for us to get sucked into the 2 dramatic games, but on the other side, there are 2 other games that were probably wanting for some drama, and and I think we need to be balanced, and look at the whole bigger picture. But yeah, I think the Super Shot, right? It was supposed to deliver close games, and I think certainly for the Brighton game, the Mavericks Panthers game, it certainly did just that. I counted 24 super shots in that game. I believe that Mavericks shot 15 and Panthers 9. It's a lot of super shots.
That is a lot of super shots.
That's crazy. Yeah, I did. Yeah, I think I missed the first quarter of that game, but I kind of brought on, and Mavericks were, what were they, 6-7 down after the first quarter, and then they just brought it back. That was an exciting game, and obviously for me, I was like, I don't really mind who wins this game. I'd quite like to see Panthers get their first win on the board, but if Mavericks win, then great, because Amelia plays for them. So it was an entertaining game. It did actually keep me invested in the game and kind of wanting to see who won that. I think Mavericks just had the superior super shot tactics. I've become quite outspoken on Twitter, and just wondering why in a super shot period as Panthers you would keep a shooter on that is not going to put you up a super shot. Suzie hasn't taken, I believe, 1 super shot attempt so far this season, and yet they're keeping her on when you've got Clara Miles on the bench who's sinking them for fun, and Betsy Creek, who that is pretty much a normal range for her. Why you wouldn't have both of those on? And then it cost them the game in the end when Suzie took a single point for some reason. But players are human and we make mistakes. But I think the coaching aspect of that probably does need to be looked at. They've obviously put a lot of bank on Gabby Sinclair being fit. Obviously, again, don't know what's going on with her, what's wrong with her, but hopefully she's going to be back soon. And that will change that up for them. Just then means that Clara Miles, who's done so well, is then obviously going to get dropped back down to next, which is fine. Those are the rules. But then you're hoping that Panthers are going to go, well, actually, we need to have Betsy Creek in at shooter. Don't understand that in the slightest. But I thought Emma Thacker shot really, really well. And I was surprised to see her come off and Amelia go into goal attack. But Amelia actually did a really, really good job. Her movement was excellent. She worked really well with Suzie Liverseidge on the line, both incredibly quick players. And she worked really well with Emily Andrews as well. So, yeah, entertaining game, very entertaining game. I'm going to say this, did not like the lights going off. Hated it at Super Cup. I hated it in that game. Obviously, Karen Gregg put a post out about it, and I will follow her on that. If you've got a defender that's going for an intercept and then they run into a player because the lights have gone off, whose fault is that? Or if an umpire misses the ball out of court because the lights have gone off, she doesn't see who it comes off and it costs the team a game. Or a shooter's just in the middle of shooting and they sky it. Like, all these things, I think we're thinking about the sportainment of it, and we're not actually thinking about the players. Like, the players are the product, so the players have got to be able to do their job, and if you're turning the lights off on them in the middle of a game, I don't think that's right. We, from the experience, and this is kind of slightly different, but at Thunder last year or the year before, they would turn the lights off at the breaks while we were still walking to the bench. And we actually complained and just said, look, can you leave the lights on at least until we've all sat down? Because these big advertising boards, we don't want to fall over them. So, yeah, we need to improve the whole value of it and the entertainment factor, but not at the expense of the player's safety.
I think that's great to get your opinion on that and to have that player perspective. Paul, what did you make of Ziggy's decision to take the one?
Yeah, look, it's hard, right? Because I compared it a little bit to I think it was the Forest Lightning game at one point, right towards the end, not right at the end, it must be said. I can't remember which of the teams. I think it was Lightning who turned down the opportunity to go for two, and then the game just kind of went backwards, forward. So it then handed the initiative, like, if you like, first centre pass, back to Forest, which in the end proved to be quite crucial to that game. So I suppose you're back in your defence, maybe, and if we use an American sport analogy, which I'll do a lot because I cover it, it's like you're back in your defence to kind of make a play then in that instance. And as Kerry has kind of so eloquently put, like you're kind of then almost, you're relying on certain parts of your team and the tactics to take over. And if was the tactic to take one and then defend, in which case it maybe wasn't on Ziggy to kind of take the two pointer, and it might have been more on the defence to get the stop. I would be loath to criticise, because I think the fact that Ziggy hasn't taken a shot feels like that's very tactical. But the point is, should she be beyond in that period? Because I think I said to you as well, Chloe, I was watching the Dragons Thunder game. I think it was in the second quarter. I think Georgia Rowe put more 2-point shots up in that quarter alone than she'd put in the previous kind of 2.5 games, if we count the kind of Birmingham one. So I do think that element of certain types of shooter is going to be something that becomes a little bit more nuanced as the season goes on. I'd be loath to criticise, because I would say in that instance, and given the numbers behind it, it's very clearly tactical that Ziggy's not putting a 2 up, I would say.
So if you had taken out all the fans in that arena, you would have heard me in my seat shouting, take the one. I actually thought that you can never be 100% sure on a decision. And it was probably, an 80-20 decision, I think. But 13 seconds left on the clock, go to the draw and then go into extra time, where you know that it's a 2-point then to win. And what was crucial to that equation that I assume, or I don't know if Berger made in her head, but that was a Panthers center. So if she takes the one and then goes for a Mavericks center, and then they hold the ball up and it doesn't go in, Panthers then have the center going into extra time, and then they can go for the 2. So, I think maybe, as you said, Paul, I think, on balance, that you have to hope that your defense then do their bit in that equation. But, I think it was the first time really that we'd sort of seen that position where someone went for a 1. It was interesting that in Forest Lightning, Ella Clark went for the 2 and missed. Yeah. So we actually had both examples of that. But yeah, interesting, Kerry. I think you're right. I think Panthers really, maybe because of the lack of Sinclair, haven't really fleshed out their strategy on the super shot. I think we did see Creek and Miles together during a super shot period in the game. My concern for them then is that they lack the presence under the post for the rebound. And I think, that's the bit that we have to talk about with tactics. Like, okay, if you do want 2 super shooters on to split the defense, like, who's going to be in there to get under it? And that's just something I think, maybe surprising that we're in week 4 but hasn't really been fleshed out. But also at the same time, I think generally the fact that we had 24 super shots in that game tells you that teams haven't really still kind of got that out. I think Tamsin Greenway said to me, like, it wasn't our plan. It was never the plan to be chasing after that game with super shots. And we should never really ever be able to get away with 15 super shots. That's just insane. So there's definitely the attacking side of it, the decision making, the defense side of it, and the decision making, because I think Jazz Brown, and actually, funnily enough, in SSN, there was a great moment where Tracy Neville had her head in her hands throwing back because, you know, you get called for obstruction on a super shot, you get to go again. And is it worth trying to block the shot? Or are you better actually being 1.5 meters back and getting ready for the rebound? So all of that, I think, is still to come, which is maybe the more exciting bit, I think, for me about the super shot. We've still got a lot to learn rather than, well, I think, you know, and it delivers that kind of result. But yeah, a super interesting game, I think. And I agree with Kerry as well. Like, having Amelia Hall on was really interesting. I think a really positive thing for Mavericks, because I don't know if the Andrew Thacker circle is really working for them. I think that we're missing that penetration, that moving goal attack. If you're going to have a moving circle, it does need to move. But they have committed to that's how they've started their first 4 games. So thought Suzie Liverseidge as well was just so comfortable with ball in hand, and she clearly is, as Kerry said, beautifully quick. So when that clicks, I think it will be great. But I think actually, if we are, I don't know if it's even worth saying this, but on the 1-point game, Birmingham are all over it. And if there would be no super shot, that would have definitely been a Birmingham win.
I'm going to go to you for Dragons Thunder, Kerry. What did you make of it? What were your kind of top line notes from the game?
Obviously, we've already spoken about Dragons and their shift in mindset from, obviously, Leah and making sure she's all right to then getting themselves back up from a game. And then on top of that, losing, obviously, Chawani didn't play in that game either. I think she was ill. So then they had a real shift in their midcourt. It was, to be honest, it was a boring game. Nothing really exciting happened in that game. Elmaray was Elmaray. Shannon did a great job considering she also played Jen the game before. I think the link in between Emma and Amy is just going from strength to strength. And I think you can see that Nicola's getting more confident with every kind of passing game that she's playing as well. And I think defensively, Thunder are doing things, but there's still an awful lot more that they can get, and they will know that, and they'll know for them that there was a lot more ball in that game that they could have actually won. Dragons, for me, I think Alex Johnson, AJ moving from wing defence to goalkeeper, she is a circle defender. They've just put her at wing defence. She started off a bit slow, but Elle's really hard to play against. But she really grew into that game. And second half, I thought AJ was excellent. Like, she did win some really, really good ball. Got some excellent rebounds as well. And I did really enjoy the tussle between her and Shannon when Shannon went to go shoot. Obviously, because they both play at Oldham and have played together before. So it's quite interesting to watch that and the little sneaky elbows that were going on there. Nice to see Georgia Rowe putting some super shots up. She obviously took on board some of the criticism that was aimed at her, I think, after, well, not last weekend, but the weekend before. I think Dragons are going to be one of those teams that are going to push teams. I'm not sure they've got their super shot tactics yet either, because I do think that Chelsea is the better shooter. I think she's also stronger under the post than Georgia, but Georgia does give you that, even though she is 6'5" or something, but she is also quite a good mover. But she's not the strongest with ball in hand when she's outside of the circle, so a lot of teams will kind of look to exploit that. But I think Elle McDonald had a really good game in the centre as well, considering she's played a lot of her time at wing defence as well. So it's really nice to see her playing quite a lot. And I think Vicky Booth was excellent as well at wing defence.
Yeah, I agree, Kerry. I think just they had to make so many changes, and Chawani being out as well, they completely rejigged defence. It just meant they were kind of playing catch up, not from the get-go, because it went kind of goal for goal early, but I think they ended up playing catch up early, and it's always hard playing catch up against a Thunder side who, I don't know how you feel about this as a former player, but I feel like with all their injuries and the kind of issues they've been dealing with, for them it's just about kind of gritting it out, which kind of makes sure they, don't lose touch with the top end of the table, and really just about making sure they are very much in that mix. And that's now 3 wins on the bounce after a loss to Loughborough. So Thunder in a good place.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that the Lightning game was probably the toughest game for the start of the season. Obviously, final rematch, but a lot of personnel changes. And I think that first game, Shadeen came out the blocks like no one's business, and really took it to Thunder. And that just wasn't Thunder's day. And I think they were finding their footing with new shooting combinations, and obviously an Retief being in there as well for Nicola. I think it is going to take them another couple of weeks to kind of really find the footing and find the right combinations in defence, because I think they've got 3 circle defenders that can kind of play everything. Josie obviously is far more comfortable at goalkeeper, but Elia and Nicola can both play back and front. I think it's going to find them time to find those combos where Nicola suits best and kind of what that partnership is. And then as the injuries are recovering, as Paige is coming back, as Lois is coming back, obviously no time frames on them, but how does that look? Like, where does that come into it? And if and when Anya's fit, is she going to go back in instead of Shannon or instead of Lucy? There's a lot of questions for Thunder at the moment, and particularly in their shooting end and what the combinations are. I think the constant we'll see, obviously, is that Elmarie is the target shooter, and that's where she probably needs to stay. And I think that's why they'll keep Shannon in the squad. I think she's a stronger goal attack, whilst I think Anya can play goal attack. She's not the strongest at it. She is better at the back as shooter, but then that moves Elle out forward. And I think at the moment Thunder want her in shoot because Emma Rayner's just launching balls into her for fun, which that was really nice to see. She did that last season as well when we played Sirens away. She's got that connection with Elmarie, and yeah, that was actually really fun to watch. And it's really nice to see Emma flourishing a little bit as well in regular court time, and she's looking pretty good at the minute.
She is. We seem to have stumbled into working our way backwards through the weekend here. So I'm going to go to Forest Lightning. Chloe, I know you watched this kind of a little bit later. I watched it kind of as live. I thought it was a very good game. In fairness, I don't know what your thoughts were, Kerry. It had a little bit of everything. The game kind of flowed quite nicely. I thought there was attacking drama. There was sort of the defence were on top at different times. It was obviously the highest scoring game of the season so far, and there was plenty of drama in it as well. But I actually thought there was a lot of quality in it as well, which ultimately we want to be able to see, right? You can be as entertaining as you like, but you need to see some good stuff out there, and that was my kind of top line takeaway from it.
Oh, it was a brilliant game to watch. I think it was one of those games that I think if you took the super shot out, it wouldn't have mattered a difference, because Rolling Striker and Ella Clark are just sinking them for fun. That's Ella Clark's normal shooting range, and Rolling just looks like she just wants to stay in that zone anyway. So that, yeah, I think that was nice to see in a way, that it wasn't just one team steamrolling ahead with the super shots, that it was literally 2 teams kind of going neck and neck with it. But again, if it was just ones, it wouldn't have mattered too much. It was a nice flowing attacking game. I think Lightning are struggling with the moving circle a little bit. Obviously they've had 6 years of feeding Mary, so it's going to take them some time to kind of get to grips with that. I think Iona Christian was very unlucky not to get player of the match. She was incredible. She was phenomenal. Like, she's really found some good form again after coming back from having her baby, and she just looks like she's not been away. I would really like to see Forest though, Niamh Cooper in wing defence with Hannah Layton in centre as well. Obviously they're both very different wing defences, so they've got that good change up, but I thought that would have been a nice little matchup. But then I did enjoy the tussle with Nat Panagari and Niamh. That's always fun to watch. I think this was the game when Rhea really stepped up for them as well. She's not had the best of starts to the season, but yeah, she really stepped up in this game for me.
Chloe?
Yeah, I think we'll all agree that Rolene has sort of dominated for Forest since the start of the season, but it was nice to sort of see the cast kind of finally step up and in all areas of the court. Like, I completely echo Kerry with Iona Christian. I think actually in the end, sort of in that really squeaky passage, she made a couple of mistakes, but Jada Pekova was actually there to sort of step in, and I thought she was brilliant at goalkeeper. We haven't maybe seen the best out of her yet, and so that was a really great game for her to kind of step in. I think when I was going back, I then rewatched the final quarter again just to be absolutely clear, particularly the last 5 minutes. And it's so funny that it's like miss, but then it's Pekova on the rebound with 3 really big rebounds, actually, including the very last one where Ella Clark misses. And that's a keeper that's like on it and hot. So that was cool to see. And I think props to Leighton out in front of her, really putting that shift in at wing defense to kind of put that pressure on the ball coming in. I think Pekova and Clark actually just matched up really well, and it really did suit Pekova to have a, let's be honest, like Clark is quite a slow to take. She's efficient, let's say, with her movement, but is slower, and it is hard. Like, if you are a goalkeeper with good jump, which I think we can agree Pekova, like a bit like Fumi Fidoji, right? They're not the tallest, but they've got really good sort of aerial time. That was really cool to see. For me, Paul, do you remember when we were previewing it? I sat here with my chest and said Nottingham need to have the best day ever. This is against Loughborough Lightning. I'm not sure Lightning are where we thought they are. Like, thought they were. Like, coming into the season, I think, Paul, you said probably the best team on paper, but Samantha Wallace-Joseph was in this 10 and then had a t-shirt on the whole time. It didn't look like she was coming on. We saw her on the bike, and maybe that loss to Thunder was flattering, actually, of Lightning, and maybe they are not a top 2 team in this league. I don't know. How do you guys feel about that one, if I just throw that out there?
I made some notes, and I just put on it, do Lightning need a better plan B? Because I kind of think, and you made this observation early on in the season, Chloe, that they are an older team, which is not meant to be a criticism, because that can work in their favour, especially if games get tight, although that wasn't the case at the weekend. But I maybe, and despite some changes, I feel like you can, if you know what they're going to do, and I think we do at the minute, you can kind of stop them. And I've always been of the opinion that, and I don't know what you think about this, Kerry, I always think Lightning will back themselves to outscore most people. But I actually think we're seeing this year that defence is going to play a bigger part going forward. And we see that in finals a lot as well. And I just wonder if that's where Lightning, at the moment, and this is still early, just find themselves a little bit short.
Yeah, I think in their shooting circle, they've got Berry and Ella, and that is it. And if that's not working, they don't have anything to change it up. Because obviously, if Sammy is in the squad, is she fit enough to be in the squad? And if they don't have her in the squad, obviously they've brought up Antonia Mitchell for a couple of games. Obviously, they don't necessarily want to put her in, even though she's incredibly tall. She's not Mary tall, but she is very tall. I've played against her this season, and she's got a really good hold, but she'll probably get out muscled a little bit from some Super League defenders just because of the extra experience. But so if Berry and Ella are not working as they weren't in the Pulse game, what options do they have to go into the circle? I said when she was signed, Sam was a risk because we didn't know how well she was going to come back, and she's had, I don't know whether she's had any extra surgeries or stuff, but obviously she's had some niggles, and she's got another niggle going on, because I can't see why, if she was fit, why she wouldn't have been put on in that game at any point. So it's an interesting one. I think defensively I agree. I think while Shadeen and Jodie are great pickups, neither of them are goalkeepers, even though obviously they do have that in their locker, and Jodie's a great flying goalkeeper. Like, she's a phenomenal athlete and she's got a great jump, but she's better out the front. And if Alice is being pinged out the game, which she does quite often, they don't have that other option. Like last year, they could put Nicola back into there. So what are they going to do? I do think they do need to start looking at mid-court options. I I would like to see a little bit more of Bella Bayliss, just to see how she can fit in, whether it's at wing attack or centre. Because like you said, they have a very experienced midcourt, we'll say. But they do need to start looking at those options, because all three of them, Beth, Nat and Hannah, I think are, I'm not going to say that they're past it by any means, and that's not me saying that, but they are at that older age now when they do need to start looking at those younger options, something fresh and new, because they've had the same midcourt for a few years now, and teams are now working them out. Like, Pulse just absolutely smothered them out of the game the other week, and they had no options for that. So Vic does need to start looking at those options, and I would start to give Bella a little bit more court time. But they do need to quickly sort out that shooting circle. Moving circles are great when they work, but if you've got a good matchup like Jada was for Ella, I agree with that. Jada had a phenomenal game. I mean, she's keeping a seasoned international out the game in Kodondi. So if you've got that matchup for Ella, who knows how to play against that style a little bit more off the body, then they need something to change that. Whether they flip them and they put Berry back into shooter and Ella out of goal attack, that could be an option. Maybe that's one that they could potentially look at.
I think the evolution of Lightning this year might be interesting, because we know Vic's a great coach. Like, there's a 2-time defending champion. So I think it will be like a real kind of, maybe a bit of an experiment as well as the season goes on, to kind of make those changes, because, you know, we're seeing teams who've kind of got options to change things up, whether through necessity in Thunder's case, because they've had so many injuries, or kind of, you know, if we look at some of the other squads, and we'll come on to Pulse in a second, Pulse's bench is making a difference for them, and all their impact players are making a difference for them at the moment. So yeah, I think we'll kind of put a pin in Lightning for the time being, and we'll see how they evolve. I will say that I do think that midcourt for Forest is something I identified early on. If they can get that right, I think Forest can be a real threat this year, and they did get it right for whatever reason. And to your point there, Kerry, they can mix those options up. Iona can play centre. You know, Hannah, we haven't seen Hannah and Neve swap so much yet, but those three in the midcourt can play in a kind of number of different combinations, which I think does give Forest an element of flexibility. We'll finish with the first game of the weekend, which was Rhinos against Pulse. My feeling on this was the tone was set early. Like, I heard more whistle than I heard anything else, and then it just became quite messy. And in the end, Pulse found the way, kind of over the sort of back end of the third quarter, and in particular the fourth. It wasn't particularly notable. Like, I thought the most interesting part of the game was Cassie Howard against Alicia Skulls, which was great fun, if nothing else, to watch the two of them going at it. You pointed this out to me, Chloe, that Leeds had clearly done their homework and made it difficult for Pulse, and Pulse haven't had it too difficult so far this season. So I think Sam Bird will probably take a fair bit away from being able to get through it. But it wasn't their best day at the office, and they still found a way to win quite comfortably, which I think is probably a good sign for them.
Yeah, go on, Kerry, you go.
I didn't watch an awful lot of this game, just because.
Oh, you did say that earlier.
I couldn't deal with the stream, but I think Rhino started off really, really strongly. I think Cassie Howard did set the tone for that first quarter with that flying in steps in the first 10 seconds or whatever it was. That was just unreal. But yeah, I enjoyed that battle between the Rhino circle defense and the Pulse shooters. Like, Jiva and obviously Liv match up quite well height wise, so there wasn't as many long balls going in, because Liz does love to just land and give that long ball into Liv. She's got a really good connection with her, and it just made Nicole have to work a little bit more kind of around the circle edge. So, and her battle with Jess Haynes was quite interesting to watch. But yeah, I think the battle with Cassie and Liz, both smaller players but both incredibly quick and feisty players, was fun to watch. I mean, Liz is one of those players that you know is always going to get an attacking contact at some point, but her speed and her flair and, like I said, that connection with Liv just kind of makes up for that a little bit. But I think Lauren is very tactically astute. She, in that first game, quickly changed what Rhinos were doing on the centre pass against Panthers, and that changed the game for them. So she's obviously done her homework on Pulse. knows them quite well and knows a lot of the players through the Roses Academy as well. And I think she knows that if you take the aerial balls away to your shooters, Fumi can't win as much ball, because obviously she's unreal in those aerial kind of battles. So you take that away from her and make her do a little bit more groundwork, it does take away the ball she can win. I'm not sure on Fumi's connection with Hallie just yet. I don't know whether Hallie had some form of injury, because she didn't play much at Super Cup, I don't think. So whether Hallie's coming back from something, but she's not been quite as effective as she normally is. But her battle with Joyce and Veal is always fun to watch, because they both love a bit of the physical. But yeah, it was an interesting start to the game. Like I said, I kind of didn't watch much after that, but
wrote it off after.
I just every time it just skipped back a few seconds, I was like, no, I've already heard this bit once. So yeah,
it sort of felt like you were going into the future. You're like, has this game already happened? It was very odd. When I said homework, I think, and it was interesting with our chat with Lauren, when we asked her, you were more of a tactician or a technical sort of master, and she went, oh, tactics. And as soon as she said that, I was like, yeah, okay, that's definitely what I saw. I think I think it was the first quiet game from Nicole Briett, and I think that was deliberate. I think she was really denied that front space. She loves to cut into a circle and demand the ball up front, and she wasn't being able to do that, which sort of then put pressure on Liv. What I think was unfortunate for Rhinos, because we have to put this into context, like Pole still absolutely dominated in terms of the scoreline, but Mavula wasn't shooting as well as she has been, and the super shots weren't falling for Leeds as they have been. And I think, Lauren did sort of say to us, like, it is an errors thing for them at the moment.
Yeah.
Like, that the mindset is there, the character is there, and the tactics are there. It's the execution. And I think for me, that's what really the story for them in that game. Pulse didn't look to me to have done so much homework. I think they played the same they have been playing. And then, when they were being asked questions of, I think maybe got over the line with sort of relying on the quality of the group that they have, and we saw the impact players, as you call them, Paul, like coming on and sort of making that difference. But I think questions were asked, and I think if you're any kind of other coach watching that game, you'll have taken some notes certainly on what Palmer was sort of planning for out in that game. But an interesting one, I think. Even if the scoreline is as big as it was, I think there's stuff there that we might see in the when these teams come up against each other again. I think it's going to be really, really interesting.
Is that a teaser for Chloe's next set of tactics that we're going to get at some point further down the line? Is that what you're going to be looking at, Chloe?
Yeah, no, I think we'll be looking at Rhinos a little bit closely. Well, because they've got a game against Thunder, so I think that one is it's going to be a goodie, because Karen Gregg loves a tactic as well, as I've kind of elucidated in previous episodes. So yeah, get ready for next week, everybody.
Listen, that's as good a reason as any, and we'll talk to you about this in a second, Kerry. But we were fortunate enough to have a real extended interview with Lauren Palmer, who's the newest coach in the Super League. She was fantastic company over coffee in the early hours of the morning. It was very early that we spoke to her before she headed out on her day. Here's a little teaser of it. The full episode will be available in the usual feeds. It's been a bit of a whirlwind start to the season. Before we get into kind of Rhinos and how kind of all that came about and how things are going, Chloe is massively intrigued by the story that you are actually also a dentist. Can you confirm it, first of all, and just let us know a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I am a dentist. I graduated uni in Manchester in 2015, so I've been practicing since. Started doing 5 days a week, now just down to one because of the netball, but quite like the dual career, and there's many a netballer in the Super League that I've helped out over the past few years. So yeah, many of my teeth rocking around the Super League at the moment.
I just think that's so amazing, Paul, to have somebody in Lauren, in the position that you're in, to have that whole other world in a career that is requires so much training, is highly skilled.
Yeah, and I think for those out there that, you know, netball at the moment, it's building to become professional, but people do need dual careers. And if, you know, you put your mind to it and there's multiple things that you're passionate about, then you can do it. And don't get me wrong, the employers at both my dental practice and at netball have always been really flex and been really good to allow me to do the two. But yeah, I do enjoy having that one day just away from netball, just doing some teeth and then cracking on ready for the weekend.
I was going to ask you that, Lauren. Does it actually help sometimes? Because, as I think we've alluded to in the past, in several interviews, players kind of and coaches are always juggling lots of different things. I think in any sport, you speak to people and they're like, "Oh, I just need that time away." Does it actually help sometimes to just take yourself away from what can be a pretty intense sort of elite environment and just sort of, not that dentistry isn't elite as well, obviously needs to be, but does it just help to be away from that?
Yeah, massively. And I always make a point of leaving my netball phone in the back room on a Friday when I'm at the practice. Just, I think sometimes it can consume you and you find yourself doing, you know, 7 a.m. till 10 at night, netball 7 days a week and in season with the travel. And I think for me, it's just that one day where, yeah, I'll check my phone at different points of the day, but just having that, do you know what, I'm going to tune out today and just focus on something different. It definitely helps me just have a day away from it.
That's so cool. But Lauren, to the netball, I suppose, after finding that out about yourself, you as a team, you've had one Super Cup final, one win and 3 losses, one of which was very, very close. It was our first sort of big eruption, I guess, against Mavericks. Where do you feel your team is at now, sort of with a third of the season now down?
For us, we're positive. We're a group that keeps belief and we know we're going to keep fighting till the very end and pushing forward. So we know the losses that we've had. The Mavs one was hard to take, but the other two against Loughborough and against Pulse, I think if we're all realistic, we would probably have never expected to win those games with the squad that we've got. You know, it's brand new. I'm a new coach and we're still forming connections both on and off the court. So to come up against sort of the top 2 in the league, you know, from last season, well, they're in the top 4, but the ones we faced, for us to say we competed with Loughborough for half a game and Pulse for 3 quarters, we've took so many positives and learnings from that, and it's the quarters that let us down that we've really looked at, and ultimately it's our own errors, not that they've done anything. Don't get me wrong, they did some pretty good stuff, but it's nothing exceptional that we've come up against that. Do you know what? If we'd have maintained the momentum and the performance that we had in those good quarters, you know, we were well in there. We were like, let's go get a point. Can we push them even further? So the belief's there, but it is, I think, just our sort of silly little errors at the moment that we're just working to try and iron out.
To that end, Lauren, how important was sort of Super Cup day? Because we've spoken to coaches around the league and obviously pre-season is a bit players here, there and everywhere. But to get, I know it was a very different type and it was quick hit netball, but to get everybody together for kind of one day to build, not necessarily just on the court, but those relationships off it where you kind of travel together and you have a bit of fun together in the downtime. So how important was that for you to sort of building what you want to build in Leeds?
Super Cup for us was huge, and not just the fact that we got to the final, that was a bonus, but for us, we'd only been together about 6 weeks at that point with myself and the full group in. So we were all sort of learning about each other. Pre-season was tough for the girls, you know, they had coaches in and out. It was very up and down. So just to get some consistency for them was huge. You know, in pre-season, we got a battering off Loughborough, and I think confidence was a little bit low at that point going into Super Cup. So we had no expectation. It was a new format. We were like, oh, let's, you know, go see what happens. And that's our building point. But the fact that we took that pressure off, we just went and thought, do you know what, let's give it a good crack. And we got to a final. The belief and it was like a, you know, light bulb switch for the girls. You know, it was, we can do that. And Harriet Jones came off after, I think it was either the Loughborough win or the Pulse win. And she was like, we can do this. And I was like, I know, but I think for the girls, them just to have that belief in me, it's hard for a player group, someone coming in that I'd worked with a few of the girls, but not all of them. And to go, actually, when we stick to task and do our processes right, look what's happened. And I think that sort of positive, that outcome from Super Cup, then we just built on that going into Panthers. And it was just, I really enjoyed the event. I love a tournament and quickfire netball. It was really, really good for us. And yeah, definitely look forward to hopefully going again next year and going on better.
I suppose, Lauren, you mentioned Harriet's reaction to the super shot. What's your own sort of take on it now that we've now had a few games of it? Where do you, and I guess with the rest of the league, the results that have landed, perhaps because of it, certainly last weekend. What do you reckon? Do you like it? Where do you sit on it?
I think we've got to change something to make netball, more appealing to fans. And if that's the super shot, then I'm all for it. I think it's very hit and miss. Some games super shot is your friend and you come away thinking it's the best thing ever, and then other games you're cursing it because you've lost a game. So if you've got a specialist shooter in your group that can nail those super shots, like on paper, it could be the teams that haven't got loads of international superstars in there, but if you've got that super shot shooter that's got a hot hand, that team can beat anyone. And I think that's what makes it a little bit more of a lottery. So, we've had games where our shooters have been on fire and we've been like, oh, this is amazing. And then other times you're like, oh no. But it's definitely something to embrace. And I've quite liked it as a coach because it's something new that you've never coached before. And, when you've coached netball a long time, it gets sometimes a little bit like same. So as a coach, it's a new challenge and something that myself and the coaches at Rhinos have sat down going, oh, well, have we thought about this, thought about that? And with SSN starting, being able to watch a little bit of that, like see what, tactics are there and just try and have a good look. And it's something exciting for both, hopefully, fans, players and coaches to get sort of stuck into.
And there we go. That was our little teaser of our interview with Lauren Palmer. You'll be able to hear that in its full version soon. Kerry, you know a little bit about Lauren. You guys have worked closely together. What do you make of her taking on that head coach role at Leeds, at the age of 33?
It's a huge step for Lauren, but I think it's one that she's kind of been wanting for a while. She stepped in a few games last season as a bit of coach development when I think Laura was ill. She does have a very tactical brain. She is extremely good at the ball work kind of stuff you do at the start of the session as well. And from speaking to a lot of the girls who have been in Pathway, her sessions can be incredibly tough as well. But yeah, she's done an awful lot in her short period. In her short time frame in netball coaching. Like, she obviously did play. I think she was a defender actually as well, I think she was a goalkeeper. So she started off and she was at Tameside Netball, and then she decided to set up her own club, Kingsway Power, who are doing brilliant things in the region, in the Northwest, and obviously nationally as well. And she's kind of set that club up from scratch, which takes some doing. Yeah, I think she did great things at Thunder Pathway as well, and it's really interesting to see how she's going to go with Rhinos, obviously stepping in at such short notice, not being able to get with the girls until after Christmas because of, I think, her contract with Thunder. But I think she's done a great job already. And I just think it's a really good step for her to take on that next jump. It's what she wanted, and I think Rhinos is probably a really good team for her to start with. I think there's not, and this is going to sound really horrible and I don't mean it in this way, but there's not a whole heap of expectations on Rhinos. People are not kind of expecting them to be challenging for the title, even though I think they can certainly push for top 4. So those expectations are slightly lower, and it's probably a really good starting point for her, and she knows the players well. The difficulty is that it's obviously not the squad that she picks, it's the squad that Liana put together. So it's how she blends some players that, maybe she wouldn't have picked up. Obviously, you're not going to know that, and I think I'll be more interested to see how she goes next season when she gets to pick her own squad and see where she goes with that. But I think for now she's doing an absolutely brilliant job with them. Like you said, she's got them doing tactical things against Pulse, and like I said, because she played as well, she's got that ability to just kind of see something that needs changing and change it straight away. And she won't be afraid to make the tactical substitutions as and when needed as well.
So great, because you pointed out so many things that we did actually talk to her about. So, Paul, I think we've done a good job.
The only thing we haven't mentioned is that she manages to juggle all this with being a dentist as well, which is remarkable.
She got my teeth whitening. I think she did most of the Thunder team's dental work last year.
She did say that.
Yeah.
She did. She did claim she'd fixed a few teeth in the league.
She did.
All right, well, guys, I think we need to move on to our preview section.
Preview round is always a little bit quicker than would be ideal, partly because we don't have loads of team news. But what we do have now is some element of form to go on, and we've got 4 rounds of action. If Chloe and I will kind of take the top line on these, and we'll throw to you, Kerry, and kind of pick out where you think the game might be won or lost, and then if we've got anything else, we'll chuck that into the mix. But the weekend starts at the moment with Forest, who are 5th, and they take on Mavericks, who are 3rd at the minute, and kind of finding a way to win is how I would say it. 7:30. It's on Sky Sports. We think that Forest looked like a team on the up. Mavs are a team finding a way. Kerry, where do you think this game is kind of going to be won and lost?
I think it's going to be I'd like to say the shooting circles, but I actually think that battle in the midcourt with whether it's Iona at wing attack against Izzy Phillips. I think that's going to be a battle, both really, really quick players, but I think Razia Kwashi's got a big job with trying to stop Rolene and those 2 pointers. So I think that's where, for me, I think is that connection between Iona and Rolene, and how Mavericks stop that is going to be the big thing for me, I think.
As a keeper, Kerry, how would you set about the Rolene challenge at the moment? Because it seems to be one of the tougher ones in the early weeks.
Yeah, I think especially in the super shot, you just have to get her near the post. Like, a lot of defenders for some reason seem to be sitting off for a little bit, but I think you just need to body up, somehow get her towards the baseline and just not let her go anywhere, because I think their other shooters at Forest are not necessarily going to take on the long shots. Rhea will do if she feels comfortable, particularly on those baselines, but I think you've just got to get her back towards the post where she's not as much of a danger, or you just have to literally just shove her as far out the circle as possible. So possibly shutting down all of their other options and making her come out to find ball if you can't stop her on that one-on-one in the circle.
Yeah, I reckon keeping her on the move is the challenge, isn't it? And I think that's what you would have seen, Kerry, and I was watching very closely in SSN, the way we've been talking about the defense of the super shot not really being up to scratch in NSL necessarily, and watching the way different teams do that in SSN. And one of the things that I really thought was very interesting was Dan Ryan's fever. I mean, I will say all of this and you can look at the score line, so bear that in mind. But what was really interesting was they took 2 timeouts before the 5-minute period, and he literally said to them, attack the super shot, keep Helen out. Like, Helen is the problem, not Grace. And I think if we could see that sort of, and I clicked it up, some pictures to save for later on when we hopefully do look at this in a little bit more detail, but the way they literally sandwich Helen, like 2, and they concede the 1 point, I think is really interesting. And I wonder if that might be something teams start looking at with Forest, just simply because Rolene is such a threat on that one. It's just really interesting to because her and El Murray really have been singing at the top of the league, haven't they, with their shots?
I think for Forest, definitely, because Rolene is their 2-pointer. So you 2-on-1her, and if there are any rebounds, just you can't take your eye off Rolene. Like, because I think there's been a lot of times where a goal attacker's got a rebound on the post and then just passed it to somebody in the super shot zone, and the defenders have been nowhere near. If there is a danger threat on those 2-pointers, then that's the one you have to go for. Obviously, with someone like Thunder, it's a bit more difficult because they all want to put the 2 points up. Whereas if you've got one out-and-out shooter, just take them out of the game. And I think Fever did do that well. I think Helen wasn't in the circle as much as she would normally be. So, yeah. I would do that.
And one final thing, actually, I probably ought to throw out here is Gemma Donoghue has obviously sort of slipped her way into the league. And if you're Chelsea Pittman, you haven't got much time to do homework on her. So you've got one game to look at, which will be really interesting for Ria. And we know that when she steps up a level, I don't think she's near her peak, but when she gets up a level, Forest do better. So Gemma Donoghue, Ria Dixon, I reckon that one will be a goodie as well.
I mean, they could look at last season and obviously have a look at her at Rhinos. Sure. But again, it's the setups and the players around it, because obviously the Mavericks defence are going to play very differently to how Rhinos played it last year.
Awesome. Okay, well, the next game is Saturday, Thunder versus Rhinos. We've alluded to it at the Bellevue, so a home one for Thunder. We've called this one in the past the Battle of the Roses, so it's got its own name, maybe eventually its own theme music. But it's on at 5 p.m. Sky Sports. Kerry, go on. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, I think there's key matchups everywhere on the court. I think the battle between Josie and Joyce will be a good one. I think it's physical, or whether there's Nicola in there, but Joyce really loves that physical. So I think the key to stopping that is your mid-court need to do a really, really good job. So I think I'm going to go key battle on this one is going to be Taylor McKevitt versus Beth Britton. They are also really, really good friends. Taylor went out to Beth's wedding last year, so that'll be an interesting one to watch at. And just seeing who is in that centre position for Rhinos as well, as to who Amy Carter gets to match up on, because I think Amy Carter has started off this season brilliantly. So whoever is in at centre for Rhinos has got a heck of a job to kind of stop her. She's brilliant defensively. We've already seen some of the intercepts which she's been picking up around the circle edge, but her feeding as well into the circle and her link with Emma Rayner, which we have already mentioned, is just growing and growing. So whoever, whether it is Rosie Harris or whether it is Ash Decker in at centre for Rhinos, has got one tough job on Saturday. So I think it's those two positions for me are the big battles.
What do you reckon, Paul?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to kind of seeing how that Rhinos defensive end deals with Thunder, because I think Jiva and Kerry pointed out, I like Jess Haynes. I thought she was really good for 7 stars last year, and I thought she did a really good job last week in keeping Nicole Briett quiet, as you'd kind of alluded to as well. So obviously the Thunder kind of goal attack, we know that El Murray will be in there, but who does she play with, and how does it look? And kind of obviously there might be a bit of cat and mouse between Karen and Lauren as well, which I think will be a kind of really interesting subplot. So as much as I'm looking forward to that matchup, I do think kind of the tactical battle might be pretty interesting, given what we've kind of discussed around Lauren and kind of how we know Greggy loves to kind of work her way through these situations, and Thunder are dealing with it perfectly. I think we've kind of spoken pretty positively about Leeds, but they kind of have lost their last 3 since winning their first game. They do need to try and, whilst they've had some performances, and Lauren alludes to it, maybe more quarters than full games, they probably need to try and sort of stop that little rot, because they have got, and you pointed this out in the interview, Chloe, they've played a lot of tough games first, and they might settle into a run, but they kind of need a win, or maybe even a bonus point defeat, because obviously a bonus point defeat gives you a point, so take something from it. Saturday is Lightning versus Dragons. On the face of it, Kerry, a game that looks like a get-right game for Lightning at the moment, because Dragons have not quite found a way to hit their stride. They're back at the David Wallace Arena in Loughborough at 6 o'clock on the BBC on Saturday evening. But Lightning sort of have lost their last 2 games against Pulse now and Forest. So they need to find something in this game.
Yeah, I think it's probably a really, really good game for Lightning to kind of back up after those 2 losses back at home and against Dragons as well. So it's probably a good game for them to kind of solidify some combos and maybe try some things as well, because I can't see anything but a Lightning win for this one personally. But it's just whether they can work out what's going to be the best combination for them in defence. I do think that it'll be interesting for Dragons if Chouani's back in this week, if she's recovered from her illness, where Elle McDonald goes. Does she go back to wing defence, considering that Vicky Booth had a really, really phenomenal game really against Thunder. So that'll be an interesting one. Where does Elle start? Does Chouani come back in, or does she go to wing attack and leave Elle at centre? Because I think Chouani is a phenomenal wing attack. Key battles in this one, I think Alice Harvey versus Georgia Rowe, both extremely tall players, where the penalties are going to lie. And I kind of hope we see Chelsea Beard in this game a little bit as well, because I would really like to see Dragons kind of close the gap on some of these teams, but they need to have tactics in that super shot time as well. But I'm looking forward to Jackie Newton versus Berry Neal. That's both quick players, clever, very rangy as well. I think that's going to be a tough game for Berry, but I just think Lightning are going to edge it.
Yeah, you kind of I think the Berry Jackie Newton one is a good one. I think really the key, and it'll be interesting to see what Bloxham does with Dragons, but I think the defense, the super shot defense, has to really be in place if Dragons are going to compete with Lightning.
Yeah.
I think if we're being honest, like the 1 point game, I think on a great day for Dragons, they might challenge Lightning, but it's that super shot period where it could just all completely fall apart, and it could be done by the second quarter, which some of the super shot games, when the winning team have sort of put their foot down and really shot the lights out in the second quarter by half time, it's kind of unrecoverable. So I think that's going to be kind of key. And I know Bloxham is a really big fan of defence. It was a big part of Wales's identity when she was the assistant coach there. So how are they looking at that tactically? And, I think you're right, Alex Johnson had a great game. So, growing into that goalkeeper bib with Jackie in front of her, like that could be really cool when it really kind of matures. So yeah, there's a lot to be done. But I think we'll be honest, like Lightning are the favourites to take this one. Yeah.
I don't know how or what their defence tactics is going to be on Super Shot, because obviously both Berry and Ella are more than capable. And are quite happy to take those shots, but it's not as simple as sandwich one of them because the other one's just going to shoot. So I think Dragons are either going to have to do a really, really good switching game, or they're going to have to do a really, really hard man-on-man game where they're literally just going to tag for a full hour, which is incredibly difficult to do. But Jackie Newton's an Aussie, and that's what she knows.
And actually, Kerry, what would you be asking of your wing defence and centre then? If you're like a keeper and you're keeping everybody trying to keep them on the move, or trying to, man on man, what are you asking of your centre and wing defence to be doing?
It depends what you're looking to do, because if you're looking to force your shooter out the circle, then you'd be looking to ask your centre and wing defence to possibly drop onto that to either cover or get that intercept. And then if they cover, then it could force the ball long into a pocket which you can have a crack at. Or if you are literally just looking to keep them back and shut them down, then just do a full man-on-man job and just really keep the centre and wing attack away from the circle, because the longer the feeds are, generally the more time you've got to get your hand on ball. And supposedly it's easier, but it depends on who the shooter is. So I think it's all your tactics, or if you've got a shooter that likes a certain spot in the circle, like if they like to shoot from top, or if they're a base shooter, can you have someone that's running into those spaces to kind of stop any drives into those from the shooter, or to win some ball from that? So it depends on who you're playing against and what you're actually trying to do against them. I think there's no really easy job. With Lightning, they both want to take those shots, then Ella will shoot from anywhere. So I think you're actually better off doing that full man-on-man tagging game against Lightning, personally. But I'm not the coach, so...
Maybe Block needs to be taking notes from you.
You can come to my session tomorrow night if she wants.
Audition from Almond. Just the one game left then, and it's sort of Panthers against Pulse. Panthers, you and I were discussing this, Chloe. They've been in all of their games. They've perhaps been a little bit unlucky, maybe not to come away with a little bit more. Pulse, obviously, as we kind of discussed, came through their first challenge. Again, it's kind of back-to-back away games for Pulse, which I know Sam Bird said last week they were expecting to learn a lot from. Like, obviously, when you go away and on the road, and kind of how you do your prep. I don't know where to start with this, because it feels to me like Pulse should have more than enough, but I can't help thinking that at some point something is going to click for Birmingham.
Yeah, I'm just gonna quickly on this one before we chuck it to Kerry. We saw Gabby Sinclair doing fitness before the game against Mavericks. Now, seeing her on court and she was practicing sprinting, changing direction in the circle, so she looked comfortable, it looked good, she was being monitored by staff. So whether that means that she could be in for this game, it would be round 5, so that would be really interesting if she is, and I think that does change things up. I mean, it's a lot of pressure on her coming straight in because, as Kerry said beautifully earlier, like she is kind of and has been the centerpiece of this super shot tactic for Birmingham. But that I think could be quite a significant addition, and you might completely skew this preview that we're going to do. But give it over to you, Kerry. What do you reckon?
Listen, if she's back, I still can't say anything but a pulse win. But because I think if she's back, she may only be limited to 1 or 2 quarters. And like you said, it's that pressure, and does she feel like then she has to just go for the 2-pointers? Even though we all watched her at Fast 5 in 2022, she was a large part of how we managed to win that tournament. And she was just sinking them from anywhere, and then obviously she was very good at them for Mavericks last year. So there'll be a lot of pressure on her if she is back, because it's like you're playing at goal attack and you're running a game against Fumi. So it's that. Is that who you really want to be playing against for your first game back? Probably not.
Just saying.
Yeah, it's just But then you've got that double threat. You've got the arms of Zara outside the circle as well, and I think for Panthers, for me, defensively, I don't think they have clicked just yet, but it's obviously a very, very new partnership. Gabby Coffey's done some brilliant things. Jazz Brown has done some brilliant things, but they've not clicked fully as a partnership yet. And I don't think Jazz Brown has actually been as good as she was last season yet. I think she possibly had an injury, though, in the latter part of last year, so that might be why, and she's just kind of building back into it. But I'd like to see her change her game up a little bit. I think in the Rhinos game in particular, she just got stuck on body, and she just needs to be able to come off the body, because if you get stuck on Liv Sheen's body, that ball is going over your head constantly. So you have to mix it up against Liv, and you have to be able to play a bit of a switching game as Nicole does running the front, or whether it's even if it's Sophie Kelly in there. I think as a defender, you have to be able to move and get off and tempt things, and that's what she's not been doing so far this season. I'm hoping she grows into it, because she's got an absolutely phenomenal amount of potential. I think Gabby Marshall's got a tough day at the office in the centre court as well. She's got to marshal those troops, pardon the pun. But yeah, she's got a tough job to kind of pull Panthers through that. I think for me personally, I would expect a rather large pulse win.
What do you make of it, Paul?
Yeah, I think Pulse are well equipped to kind of deal with whatever challenge Panthers can throw at them. We kind of spoke about it a little bit earlier, in that whilst they've been in their games, they are maybe a touch one-dimensional. That might change, as we mentioned, because Gabby would kind of completely kind of alter the landscape. But if it's 1 quarter or 2 quarters, it would be for a limited time. I just think Pulse's connections just look really, really good. They're a team a bit like Lightning, a bit like Thunder, who have been together for a while now. And I think you can see that, because they've hit the ground running. Right, they've flown out of the traps. They look good. I'm sure they would say as well, tougher challenges will lie await for them as the season goes on. But you can only kind of do what you're doing so far, and they do look pretty strong across the court. I'm going to say, and Kerry mentioned Zara, I think Zara's gone massively under the radar this year. She's had an incredible season at wing defence. She's always someone who kind of stands out to me, but I kind of also the closest team to me, so I see them more often than I see most teams in person. And I think a lot of what Zara does well, you see when you're at an arena. I think she does an awful lot of work really well, and I was pleased to see her finally get some sort of player of the match recognition over the weekend, because she deserved it. She's had a really good season.
Didn't Liz get Pom though?
Oh, she did. Sorry, you and I were talking about this, because didn't you say to me Zara was robbed, and I was like, she was player of the match, wasn't she? And then we found out that it was Alicia Skulls. But okay.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think Everett has been an absolute monster. I think I'd only wish we'd have proper stats to kind of show that, because I think actually you're right. A lot of the work she does is off the body and in that sort of zero phase. But I think there are a few sort of intercepts and deflections and stuff that she probably does also have to an aim. I've got a question for you, Kerry. If you are Joe Tripp, are you starting Aaliyah Zaranika or Michelle McGee at wing defence if you're taking out the Scholes?
That's a tough one. I think Aaliyah probably matches up better for the speed, but I think Shelley matches up better with the kind of the experience level and knowing the little tips and tricks. So I would probably go Michelle McGee. Just I think she does have a better understanding on the line with Gabby Coffey and Gabby Marshall. So that's where I would go, and then bring Aaliyah in for a bit of impact later on if you need some arms in there. I think, but Shelley's better on the ground, and she'll do the hard yards outside that hopefully will bring in Jazz Brown.
Because I think disrupting that connection into Liv Sheen is going to be, if they stand a chance, it's going to be that, isn't it?
Agree.
Very good. Round 5, done and dusted. Kerry, thank you first of all. I hope you've enjoyed it. We always tend to waffle far longer than we anticipate, but when we get kind of you guys in the house, it's really good for us to pick your brains and kind of understand a little bit, and also kind of get your guys' thoughts on the season so far, because what's gone before in the Super League is kind of setting the template for this, but this new era, we want to hear from all you guys. So we thank you for your time.
Oh no, thanks for having me. I can waffle about netball as long as I can. Really, I can just talk netball all day. But yeah, I've enjoyed it. It's been great.
So look, I think as far as we're concerned, then usual kind of sign-off rules apply. We'll kind of pop up in your feeds. We'll have this and both the Lauren Palmer extended interview. Please kind of subscribe, like, rate us, all those things. Drop us a review if you're feeling creative. Those things help us, and we'll be back next time.